But during that period that I was in the legislature, and during this period of grappling with what I should do, God began to challenge, to refine, and to enlarge my understanding of what law and government really are, and begin to challenge whether what I thought I believed about them was really real. During this period from 1990, when I left Cincinnati, to 1994, God was working in my heart. And in 1992, the United States Supreme Court was given the opportunity, after 20 years, to reverse Roe versus Wade. The court declined, but what I found really profound was the reason the court gave for not reversing Roe versus Wade. Listen to what the court said. For 2 decades, people have organized their intimate relationships and made choices that define their views of themselves in reliance on the availability of abortion should contraception fail. When you think for a moment about that statement, it is truly remarkable and terribly profound. What they are saying is that after 20 years of a law allowing abortion, it has begun to change the way we think of ourselves. It's begun to change the way we view ourselves, our understanding of sexuality, of reproduction, of procreation, of children. Because the law, you see, had taught us something. And I began to realize that the law can actually, in time, shape our moral and our ethical values. That's what the court was saying. And I began to think, well, duh. I mean, don't we intuitively believe that the law would allow things that are good and prohibit things that are bad? I mean, whoever would advocate for a law to prohibit good things? Whoever would advocate for a law that allows bad things? You see, our understanding of right and wrong and good and evil, of our moral and ethical values, are so intertwined with law that I would submit to you that when our moral and ethical values conflict with our legal values, we have the cruel alternative as a culture over time to either lose our moral values or lose our respect for the law. And you know how I think it plays out? I think it plays out that after 30 years of allowing abortion and saying it's good, it's okay, we will protect it, that some people aren't even sure ethically if partial birth abortion, where we remove the brain of a baby who's all been delivered but the head and crushed the skull, we're not sure that that's morally repugnant. On the other hand, there are those who have said, you know, if the law is going to allow that, I need to take the law into my own hands. They lose their respect for the law, and maybe that's why they shoot the abortionist or bomb the clinic. Law begins to shape our values. It begins to teach us. And I realized that law has an educative, instructive component to it. And unfortunately, I began to realize that we as Christians had forgotten that. But it's actually very scriptural. What do we find in the book of Romans? We see Paul saying, I would not have known sin but through the law. He goes on to say, I would not have understood. I wouldn't have gotten this concept of coveting but for the law forbidding it. In Galatians, the Apostle Paul says that the law was our tutor to bring us to Christ. In other words, the justness, the rightness of the law reflected a value system that helped us understand we can't keep the law and that we're in need of a Savior. This educative, instructive, moral shaping value of the law began to really weigh heavily on me when I was in the legislature. Because I started asking myself, by passing this law, what am I teaching the people in this room, the next generation? We had an interesting debate one day, and you may or may not remember, you may have been too young, but there were a rash of young girls who were getting pregnant and throwing their babies when they delivered into the dumpsters behind their high schools and behind businesses. They didn't want them. So some states began to pass what they called drop-off baby laws. where if you had a baby, within so many hours after having the baby, if you didn't want it, you could take it to a hospital or take it to a fire hall. And our legislature was considering whether Tennessee should have a drop-off baby kind of law, and the Attorney General from the state that had passed the first law came to testify about the value of the law and how many babies had perhaps been saved. And I asked him the question, I said, "Sir, let me ask you, what do you think are the implications, the consequences of a law like this 20 or 30 years from now, in terms of what it will teach us about the dignity of human life and the intrinsic value of human beings?" And he said, "You know, I don't really care. I'm just worried about saving the baby that will be in the dumpster next month." And I said, "Sir, I am too. But I am more worried that even as in 1973 we said abortion was fine, you could kill your baby, and now we allow partial birth abortions. Will our culture not soon believe that children are nothing more than a commodity you buy at a department store and you can get a refund if you don't want to keep it? And will that not in time cause us to kill more babies than the few we'll save in the next year or two?" I'm pro-life. I voted against the bill. It passed. And I don't know, to be honest, if my thought process was correct. But you see, we can't ignore that the laws we vote for and the politicians who will vote for those laws will eventually begin to shape your children's culture and their value system, if not your own.